Advanced Financial Modeling, Topic 6, Forwards and Futures. Learning Objective number 7, we're going to assess futures basis risk. So let's think about basis risk at Hershey Foods. Suppose Hershey needs higher quality Ghana cocoa, but the futures contract they know will result in the delivery of Ivory Coast cocoa because it's the cheapest to deliver. We'll say the current difference between Ivory Coast and Ghana cocoa is $200. So that's the price of Ghana versus Ivory Coast. We'll call that the Ghana Ivory Coast basis. And I'll just denote Ghana with GH and Ivory Coast with IC. Now, Hershey could still use the Ivory Coast futures contract to protect against overall increases in cocoa prices as long as the Ghana Ivory Coast basis remains the same. So let's do an example. Say Hershey goes long 100 contracts, 10 tons a contract, so that's 1,000 tons at $25.50 for December delivery. And they know if they wait till December, they will get Ivory Coast cocoa, but they don't want it. At the time, the Ivory Coast spot price is $2,500. Remember that futures price for December delivery is $25.50. So we say the futures spot basis is $50 at the time when Ghana cocoa is selling for $2,700. So at the time they enter into the contract, Ivory Coast cocoa was selling in the spot market at $2,500 and Ghana was selling for $2,700. So the basis, it was $200. But now they have this long position to buy Ivory Coast at $25.50 for 1,000 tons. In December, what if Ghana cocoa goes to $3,700, Ivory Coast cocoa goes to $3,500? So the basis is still the same. It's still a $200 difference between Ivory Coast cocoa and Ghana cocoa. Let's see what happens to their costs. Well, if they didn't hedge at all, it would cost them $3,700 per ton times 10 contracts times 100 tons per contract. It would cost them $3.7 million to buy cocoa if they just waited. However, at the time, Ivory Coast cocoa was selling for $25.50. That's for December delivery. They were hoping that, if the basis remained the same, they would expect to spend 27 or 2.75 million for Ghana cocoa. So I'll say that one more time. At the time they put on the hedge, January 1st, 2019, Ivory Coast cocoa was selling for $25.50, and they would expect that Ghana cocoa should be selling for $27.50 if I just add the 200 basis to it. So that's really what they're expecting to pay. If they didn't hedge at all, it looks like just cocoa prices went up in general, maybe due to some weather events. Both of them went up by a lot, but the basis remained the same. So let's talk about the profit on their contract. So say right before delivery and December 15th, 2019, they short 100 contracts. Remember, each contract is for 10 tons. They went short at $3,500. They are initially long at $25.50. They're going to make a profit on that difference. Remember, they're a buyer at $25.50. They shorted, they're a seller at $3,500 times 1,000 tons. They're going to make a profit of $950,000 from the exchange. Remember, I said that if they're going to unwind the contract and they're still going to buy the Ghana cocoa, whatever the price is going to be. So they're going to wind up paying $3,700 per ton for cocoa. So that's still going to cost us, as their unhedged cost is $3.7 million. But when you add the profit of the futures contract, $950, you get a hedge cost of $27.50, which is exactly what they were hoping for. So what did this do for them? It hedged the overall price of cocoa. Even if cocoa goes to $5,000 per ton, as long as Ghana cocoa is selling for $5,200, they're still going to lock into $27.50. So they're no longer exposed to rising cocoa levels as long as the basis is maintained. And that basis is that difference between Ghana cocoa and Ivory Coast cocoa. However, I'll do one more example. I'm going to repeat this example, except what if at maturity the basis goes from 200 to 500? So the only difference in these two is that at maturity, Ghana cocoa goes to 4,000. This is still 3,500, so the basis is 500. So what happens to their unhedged cost and hedge costs? Well, their derivative profit is still $950,000, right? Because nothing changed in Ivory Coast cocoa. However, they're going to have to go out in the market and buy Ghana cocoa for $4 million, right? Because that's $4,000 per ton times 1,000 tons. And their hedge costs go to $3 million, which is higher than what they were hoping for. It's still better than the unhedged cost, but they're worse off because the basis widened. Now there's a shortcut to get to this number. If you're just looking for what is my hedge cost when I'm doing this is called a cross hedge. You're hedging one commodity with another commodity. You're hedging the price of Ghana cocoa with the price of Ivory Coast cocoa. So a shortcut to getting to this profit without doing the whole spreadsheet, it's whatever the futures price is, in this case the Ivory Coast cocoa, plus whatever the new basis is. So you locked into 25.50 on the Ivory Coast cocoa, and then I put in the new basis of 500. That's the extra you'll pay for the Ghana cocoa, times the 1,000 tons, you'll get exactly that $3.05 million. So cross hedges are used all the time in the marketplace because the cheapest to deliver asset isn't exactly what the hedgers want. However, as long as the basis between what they want, the asset they want, and the cheapest to deliver asset remains the same, you could easily hedge the price using a cross hedge as long as that basis is unchanged. So, Hershey's cross hedge of Ghana cocoa with the Ivory Coast cocoa futures will hedge against overall increases in cocoa levels. Hershey is still exposed to a widening of the basis at maturity, but that risk hopefully is lower than the greater risk of the overall market in cocoa going up. An interesting development in the market is they've developed a new set of instruments which actually help companies like Hershey manage this basis risk, and they're called basis swaps. They can negotiate with a third party a contract that pays them if the Ivory Coast Ghana basis widens. So that's how Hershey hedges in total. They'll actually enter into futures contracts to locks into the price of effectively Ivory Coast cocoa, and if they want Ghana cocoa, they'll enter into another contract with another market participant that will pay them if that basis goes up. So they'd have this basis swap. But we're not going to cover that in this course. It's just an interesting development.